Wow, hello subscribers! There are a lot of you. The subscribers army has been growing every day. I made a YouTube Shorts in celebration for 666 of you, and it's been growing.
Nice.
For today, I wanted to share my tips and tricks with the program Procreate and a breakdown of how I made this image of Vixie for you all. Now, if there's anything I missed in this video, or if you haven't seen some of my other videos, let me know, and I will add it to my list of future videos. Let's jump right into what brushes I used for this particular piece. Now, I use a range of free brushes that already come with the program, and others that I find online. Some of them I paid for. The technical pen is my favorite. I love it. It has the easiest that I can use for sketches, line art, and even coloring, and I use different line sizes and thicknesses, and I've changed the settings a little bit just so that I can change how, because I move my hand very heavy-handed and very swiftly, I needed to change that so that the line actually catches up with the speed of how fast or slow I draw. I used to use a program called Metabang Paint, and it is very slow, if that makes sense. Like, when I switched over, I didn't realize just how fast it was. It is like you are actually using pencil to paper, and what you are making, that is the motion you're using. It's not slowed down, so you have to make those adjustment settings for yourself on what works best for you. Another thing I like to use is actually pen or ink bleed pens for my sketches, because I don't like to, unless it's an airbrush, really use a lower opacity, because I don't like to use layer on top of layer. I like to have it solid and see what I'm looking at, because when I use my sketches, I actually use colors to distinguish and differentiate them, and then I'll just lower the whole layer's opacity. It's just much easier for me. It may be different for you, but use whatever you think works best for you. This is just what I like to use. For this piece, when creating the rough sketch, I did a zoomed-in headshot of Vixie's face, then I refined the sketch by adding in the details of her hair and other markings and details on the eyes, very roughly color blocking them in with that airbrush, just so that I knew where I wanted the highlights and the different shades of hue and everything in her eye. When I moved forward with this, I also wanted to make sure that I can distinguish how much line weight I wanted. In other illustrations I've made, at this stage, I will either go in directly to paint over it, like I did with the Connor from my last video, or I will do line art of just the necessary things that I need. Then I will create a layer underneath it, and I will select the line art, and I will change the layer settings to reference. Then I'll go back to that layer underneath it. Now I can drag and drop the colors in, and it'll be just referencing that particular section. Another thing to bear in mind when you're dragging and dropping your colors is be aware of how much your threshold is. You may need to use the slider bar to adjust this. See how it colors everything if I don't set it right? It'll be different for everyone. Then I will tap continue filling to color in any other spots, such as her ears and her neck. And from there forward, I just do this with the whole piece. I just kind of drag and drop the colors that I need. Another helpful quick tip is, if you use colors for a particular character over and over again for a comic, on the side, create your own little color palette. It comes in so much handier than having to drag and drop the colors from your reference. Then I will add detail where needed, such as for the eyes in this particular piece, which I'll go over more in depth in the time-lapse, but just for the sake of just a quick example, I will go from my flat colors to each individual section and add shadows and highlights. I will do a mix of cell shading and painterly styled blending as needed. Cell shading I usually designate for sort of sharper shadows, whereas the painterly I'll do for more like reflective lights and for clothing where I need it to be a nice soft kind of blend. I will also render in details, such as I will add little hatching lines to distinguish the hair and the fur and shiny stuff. But let's go into a bit more detail through the time-lapse, because I know that this can be a lot, and I'm a visual learner, and just seeing a step-by-step tutorial like how I've seen in those tutorial books isn't always helpful for everyone. So, let's break down what I did first. Adding the general shapes for the head, I start out where the top of her skull is to the bottom of her chin. I will add the lines, generally roughly sculpting out where I want her cheekbones, her eyes, and everything to be. This is up to you on what you're making, because if you're making a human or any others, it will depend on what you are wanting, so whatever you feel stylistically best fits for pushing the proportions, such as big old anime-like eyeballs or teeny tiny little cartoony dotty eyeballs, and so forth. Same thing with adding as much detail as you want to the hair, or adding sections like I do. I like to consider the sections of the cheek fluffs and the hair fluffs in different parts. For this instance, because there's a lot of her hair, I decided because it's so zoomed in, you wouldn't see her ponytail that she usually has behind her, so I just did the bangs and the general floofy bit of her hair that will go behind and tuck behind those ears. I also went in, and as I was refining this sketch, I just roughly colored in the general hues of the eyes from light to dark and the little sparkly highlights. Then I moved on to the line art. Now, in this stage, you can either go directly in and line art what you want and make sure that you use line variation and weight accordingly to your style, or you can go straight into painterly styles and paint in the details that you want over top of it and add in all of your rendering to separate those sections, because if you saw it in my Detroit Become Human Connor painting that I did, I had to separate each of the layers and go back in to add in shadows and highlights to separate, otherwise some of your layers might accidentally blend into each other. For this particular case, since I'm using thick line artwork and thin line artwork, just kind of line variation, I wanted to focus it on the face the most, so I bolded around the hair so that it drags your eye towards, well, her eyes and her face. I also needed to make sure that the sections where I wanted her fluffy cheeks and her ears and all of that, the separation where the colors will go from a lighter to a darker, there's just a really thin line, almost as if it's non-existent, because I want to be able to drag and fill a lot of colors. I actually utilized my painterly style to fill in the eyes, where I didn't just make circles with a black line art, I just went in with the base layer, added in some shadows, a thicker, bold shadows here and there, and then I also added in a highlight. Now this is something new that I haven't done before, but I added a multiply layer reflecting what almost looks like mountains or trees in the distance. I sort of blended in as best I could, added in some reflective highlights here and there, and just I kept adding more detail. Now, I don't usually add this much detail to the eyes, but this is the main focal point that I wanted. In a piece where if, for example, it was a full body of Vixie, I might not add in this much detail to it just because you might not see it, but I would still want Vixie's face to be the focus. So for this particular piece, the eyes are the main thing that I focused my time on for rendering's sake, and then I went back in and I color filled in all of the other spots, and then I went in to add in the shadows of the fur on her head and her ears and her hair. Some of the stuff that I also like to do at this stage is just to make sure that if there's anything that I am missing, I can catch it here at this stage, because once I add in my shadows and highlights, it's kind of hard to go back in and fix it. So I wanted to make sure I knew where the lights and shadows were in this piece, because she's not in an environment, she's just basically a profile picture in an avoidance space. So I used just sort of the general shadows where I feel like the hair is overlapping, and for her face, to show the depth and three-dimensional kind of space going on here, I actually follow a curve with the hair when I'm adding my highlights and shadows to kind of show the distinction that her hair is not just a flat cardboard cutout. There is on the back underneath her chin here, you can see that it is more shadow, whereas on the left side where her cheek floof is, there's more highlights, and it's kind of rounded off. I also, as you see here, with my highlights and shadows, go back in with a blending brush. I'll usually use the technical pen, and I'll take it and I will brush in sideways to give that illusion of those being hair strands or fur strands, and sometimes I'll go ham on this, but for this one I used a lesser one because I didn't want to go really ham on this. This would be sort of like a mid-range of sort of generally cell shading, not so much blending and painting. So the next step that I did was add in those, I guess you would call them sort of like the contour or the general shape curves, such as the bridge of the nose, the curves of the inner ears, such as the pink part of her ears. They are generally going to be almost cone-shaped, so I wanted to give that general shape of the shadows to kind of help add to the illusion of three-dimensional for this particular piece. Another thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to use a bit more of a blended sort of soft painterly style for the clothes and for the reflective spots such as her nose and the orb on her cape. And of course the final touches of using a screen layer to create the glasses reflective illusion by lowering the opacity and erasing and blending as needed. And there we have it, a finished illustration of Vixie. Now this is just how I would draw a headshot of my Fursona character. I will be planning on making some future tutorial videos ranging from how I do sketches, how I do my line artwork, how I do humans versus furries, and any other videos that you guys would like in the future, let me know. And whether you already knew these tips and tricks or if you found this helpful, don't forget to leave a like down below to let YouTube know so we can reach a wider Subscribblers army. And thank you all so much, Subscribblers. Stay possum, have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye! Thanks for watching. Till next time, here's some playlists of all of my videos. If you'd like to see more and support this channel, click the link tree down below. Patreons and the Fennec Fox tier get access to sketches. Arctic Foxes get shoutouts at the end of my videos and access to all of my projects early. Red Foxes get the opportunity to be featured as a background character or a commission instead. And for free, just subscribe to join the Subscribbler Squad for weekly videos. Stay possum, and I'll see you later.